Hello and welcome to the Chess on Toast game of the day from the FIDE Candidates tournament currently running in London. We're looking at round 8 today. My name's Nick Murphy. With me, as always, International Master Lorin D'Costa. So Lorin, we're looking at round 8. Which game are you going to show us?
Well, in this round, Nick, there were a couple of victories, weren't there? But the one I've plumped for is the one between Vladimir Kramnik and Peter Svidler. So Kramnik, for those who don't know, is a former world champion, and he's basically, I think he's the #2 player in the world.
I think he is, and we've also not done a video on him so far, have we?
Right, yeah, it's quite surprising because apparently he's now a dark horse for the title after this win. And here he beat Peter Svidler, who we mentioned before was a 6-time Russian chess champion, deservedly here in London, playing in this Candidates tournament. And the game actually followed one of Svidler's favourite openings, which is the Grunfeld defence, which is after the moves d4, knight f6, c4. For those who saw our video on the previous round, you'll see why white does this, because white wants to play knight c3 and e4. So after g6, knight c3, black could now go into what's called the King's Indian defence, which is to allow white to go e4, but the idea is to try and hit back with e5 or c5. So that's, again, one of the other major openings. But Svidler instead, after knight c3, played the Grunfeld, which is d5. Now, I believe we've had this before. We've seen it before. No, it occurred in one of the earlier rounds of the videos that we didn't do.
Right.
It occurred actually in one of Kramnik's games. No, it was Ivanchuk against Carlsen back in one of the earlier rounds. And Carlsen played the Grunfeld defence. And the reason why I didn't choose that video was because I thought the Grunfeld wasn't really a kind of user-friendly opening to try and describe. And here we're going to see exactly one of the reasons why that is. Because
so we're going to try and describe it.
We're going to try and describe it. Well, why it's potentially quite dangerous. Well, the point is of playing c4 is that white wants to swap that pawn for a slightly more central pawn, right?
Yeah.
So white played c takes d5. Now there are tons and tons of other moves in this position. I mean, there are hundreds of variations against the Grunfeld.
Is it not quite interesting that Kramnik went into the Grunfeld? If Peter Svidler is known to really like this opening and is a bit of an expert on it, and Kramnik would know that, I mean, is it not weird that Kramnik would allow him to play that opening then?
Well, not really, because as we're going to see, white had a trick up his sleeve much later in the game, which we're about to show. And Kramnik entered one of the variations that he's played before, which is to take and then play e4. Now this is the one that most people would play if you just saw the Grunfeld ad hoc, because it appears that black's given you this big centre, hasn't he? I mean, we've got 2 pawns in a centre.
Looks pretty sensible.
And we're attacking the knight, which has to do something. So black normally takes on c3. And this appears to strengthen white's centre even more, doesn't it?
It looks very sensible, that.
But the point is, after bishop g7, white now played knight f3, and here we see black's idea. He goes c5, and he's trying to chip away at this long diagonal, isn't he?
Yes.
So we've done a fianchetto quite a few times in our videos, and here we see exactly the same idea. Black says, well, you can't move that important d-pawn, because the pawn and c3 behind it will be captured, won't it? As we see in that bishop x-ray across the board there towards the rook.
This fianchetto idea, it's come up a lot. It's a really popular idea, right at the very top level of chess.
That's right. So Kramnik played bishop e3, which is his speciality. I mean, these moves make perfect sense. They all cover the important pawn on d4. So whilst black is attempting to attack with all these different pieces, and in fact he can now play knight c6 as well to attack it, white's trying to defend. It's not really defending it though, is it? Because white's defending a very strong point, isn't he?
Yes.
It's definitely worth defending that pawn on d4. So you can't really say white's defending and black's attacking in this position. I think that would be too simplified to explain that like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is one variation. Another variation which is very popular is to play rook b1, and that gets the rook off that long diagonal. And after castles, go bishop e2, because when black takes, of course white takes with the pawn.
Yes. We
need to keep that centre. Black can actually win the pawn on a2 in this manner. And this is one of the other key Grandmaster battles that happens, where black says, I'm a pawn up for absolutely nothing, and white says, well actually I don't think you have, because I've got these, and I've got full development, and you've again got that lack of development over here.
It's that word that we hear quite a few times, compensation.
Compensation, yeah, good. So again, there's plenty in that. I've had this once or twice myself. It's quite a... Well, how do you describe it? It's a bit of a roller coaster ride for both sides, I'd say. But Kramnik's not really into that. He doesn't really want to sacrifice. So instead he played bishop e3. And Svidler, of course, very well prepared. And he played the so-called main line, which is queen a5. So now black is not only threatening to take there due to the pin, he's also threatening the pawn. So white's really only got one move, which is queen d2. And black played knight c6. So all quite sensible moves. Notice again, white cannot play d5 because...
Cannot play d5 because now the bishop could take the pawn on c3 and would pin the queen to the king.
Exactly. So again, black says, well, yes, you may defend that pawn, but you're not doing anything with it at the moment. No. And now rook c1 was played. This is one of those moves you think, surely rook should go on open files. And more importantly is, why aren't we doing anything about this on the king side? Well, as you see here, this pawn on d4, the Grunfeld is all about whether that pawn on d4 is basically better than that pawn on b7, because these pawns here on the queen side could be quite an asset for black in any endgame, an outside pass pawn. But pawns in the centre when all the pieces are on is of greater importance, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's basically what this opening revolves around. Can white keep that centre? And if black doesn't do enough, then white's going to have a stable advantage, as we see in the game. So rook c1 is, well, it now makes sense because white's defending the pawn. So if, for example, black plays castles, now we see white's idea to go d5, because that isn't on anymore, is it?
No.
So black would have to go here, and as we see, white gets a massive centre like this. I mean, we could even think about e5 already, with bishop c4, short castles. Does it look quite pleasant for white now?
That looks much better for white to me.
Yeah, exactly. We've got this massive centre, and we've pushed it up one square. So I think that's something black should really try to avoid. So Svidler took on d4, which is the main line. Of course, white captured back with the...
we
want to keep our centre. So.
Yes, so I suppose you'd have to take back with the pawn on c3.
And black swap queen. So this isn't going to be one of those dull games. So don't switch this channel off, okay? Because it gets
normally
a bit more
if
exciting.
they swap queens early on, it tends. Would you agree? It tends to lead to a sort of quick draw or a draw.
Again, that's far too simplified.
Sure.
I mean, as we see in the game, white gets tremendous pressure. But first of all, let's look at the concrete moves here. White can capture with 3 different pieces, but which is the only one he can actually capture with?
Well, I mean, you'd want to catch with one of your minor pieces, like the bishop or the knight.
But what happens if we do that? What about that pawn on d4?
The pawn on d4 stops being so defended, but...
so if knight takes d2, for example, black can get away with this. And
if you take with the king, you've lost the right to castle your king to safety.
That is true, but king takes d2 happened. Now, I suppose it's not one of those eeny, meeny, miny, mo variations where you thought, oh no, I'm going to lose my pawn on d4 if I don't capture with the king.
He'd know what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. These guys know what they're doing. But actually, because the queens are off, the queens are being exchanged, the king on d2 isn't such a bad piece.
Yes, of course, because there's less danger, or certainly immediate danger.
That's right. Obviously, black still has a number of major pieces on the board, but I think without the queens, the king is going to breathe slightly more easier, isn't he? Because there's now, I mean, for example, if black had a queen on a5, this would be horrible for white, wouldn't it? But as we see in the game, white can get away with this. So he went d5. Can you suggest another move here? Just suggest a sensible move.
Something like bishop c4, say.
Bishop c4 is sensible. Bishop b5 looks also very dangerous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because if black plays passively like bishop d7 to defend the knight, white gets a really big advantage with this move. Black's only square is probably there to defend its bishop. But now we see the point of white's idea. Rook c7.
And you're going to win a pawn, aren't you?
There's carnage. Well, black can... I think he can go here, but then after something like king d3, defending the pawn on e4, the king looks a bit weak there. But actually, more to the point is that this is happening. The fact that...
If you get the rook on the 7th rank is usually a very good thing to have, isn't
That's right. So I think black's in danger here. So after bishop b5, you have to be a very prepared player to play the Grunfeld, and there's only one move in this position, but luckily it's okay for black, which is to go f5. And that's attempting to smash open the f-file, challenge white's pawn on e4, and drag the bishop into the game. So for example, after e takes f5, bishop takes f5, yes, white can win a pawn, but black goes rook b8, and now black's threatening stuff, so white's kind of got to be a bit careful here. I think this position's meant to be equal at the top level, so really white shouldn't play this. And I think Svidler would have been happy with this. I think he'd have just played this if this had happened. So Kramnik played d5, and again, we don't really want to move the knight to somewhere like there, because I think rook c7 is quite an annoying move again, isn't it?
It is.
And the bishop now is a bit stuck here. So black played rook d8 instead to pin. Now this is the key moment of the game, because you're talking there. You asked the question earlier, Nick, why would Kramnik do all this if he knows Svidler knows all this? Well, the main line is to play king to e1 and escape the pin, forcing black to do something about the knight on c6. And after the moves, for example, knight a5, we say knight's on the rim are dim, but actually this is okay here because white's unable to really attack it. If bishop d2, black can just go b6 and everything's okay.
Yeah.
The rook on c7 doesn't really do much because now black can just simply go here. And in fact, I think white's got to be careful now because black is fully mobilised. And what are these guys doing over here?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a bit of a knife-edge position here. And we know that the king cannot castle, can it? Cause
no,
it's moved.
even if you move that bishop, sorry, on f1 somewhere else, you still can't castle because the king's already moved once.
That's right. So after king e1, knight a5, for anyone who's actually interested to know what the theory is, it's bishop g5, which looks a bit weird, but black's got a little bit of a problem about this pawn. He can't go there, of course, because of the pin. So black's, well, if he goes king f8, then maybe now rook c7 looks quite good because there's a lot of pressure on here. So, yeah, I'm not really sure about this for black. But black has bishop d7, which is a nice little trick, actually, because after bishop takes here, black can play a skewer with rook e8, can't he?
Wow, that's, yeah, nice move.
And probably white's king is going to be a little bit of danger, because if we go d6, then, well, there's a number of moves, but probably bishop f8 looks quite good. The idea is if he takes, then we can go check and win the bishop back.
Right, yeah.
So, again, white's pieces are not looking that great over here, are they?
No, it looks terrible.
So, going back to the game, after rook d8, Kramnik actually uncorked a novelty, which is what we describe as a new move played at the top level, which was king c2. You were going to say, Nick?
Well, I was just going to say a novelty, so a move that we wouldn't necessarily have seen before at this level.
That's right. So king c2 looks, well, it's quite natural. I mean, the idea is to bring the king back to b1, or maybe if black doesn't go anywhere with his knight, you can actually put the king on b3, which is what we see later in the game. And the king does a very good job over here of just monitoring these two pawns, because black really wants to get these guys going, doesn't he?
And also, am I right in thinking that if, you know, a lot of the rest of the pieces got swapped off, the fact that white's king is kind of advanced already halfway up the board would actually be useful for white in an endgame?
That's right, because in the endgame the king should be used, shouldn't it? You know, always use the king, you're told, in the endgame. So
sort of save time because his king's already advanced.
That's right. White's just got to be a bit careful that with these rooks on the board, he doesn't start playing a bit of a dangerous game and getting his king.
It's dangerous at the moment, but as I say, potentially it could be useful if the rooks say got swapped off. It might be a really useful piece.
So black played knight e5. Well, I think he could have gone knight a5, but maybe he just thought that after something. Now I have no idea what Kramnik intended here. Let's have a look. Maybe, I mean, he could just play king b1. It seems so weird that white has almost forgot to castle in the wrong way. You know, like, that's obviously illegal, isn't it, if you castle queenside? But he's gone around the rook, hasn't he, in this kind of sort of strange trapezium. So, I don't know, maybe he wanted to go there and then bring the bishop out on f1. Maybe he could have played bishop g5 again, trying to take advantage of that pin. So who's to say what he had planned? But after knight e5, we see white's idea. He swaps, and then now he starts getting these pawns forward at f4. And these pawns actually win him the game, don't they? And we talked about this, didn't I, at the very in the opening spiel, about how these pawns, their strong centre, is it better than black's sort of counterparts on the queen side? And as you'll see in the game, that's the deciding factor. That black basically doesn't get these pawns on a7 and b7 going forward, and white's pawns in the centre roll up the board to devastating effect. And that's the main thing to take away from this game. You don't need to necessarily understand the Grunfeld, but just understand the pawn structure that's involved, which is white has this mobile centre, and if black's not careful, even the top players can be undone. So as we see, now king b3 was played, so I did talk about the king being an asset, and the king decides to charge forward, but is it in that much danger?
There's no immediate danger by the looks of things.
Well, can black go b5 and then after something like bishop e2, can he go a5?
Yes, that all looks fine.
But in fact, I think white's pawns on the centre are just far more potent, aren't they? I mean, yes, the king ends up going backwards, but where's that bishop going on d6? And if it goes here, you know, you can consider moves like rook c7 and maybe something like bishop f3 to defend the pawn. I mean, these guys are really strong, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you see how white's pawn on a2 prevents black from doing anything too bad with these ones.
Well, as you say, I mean, those two pawns there, the king and the pawn on a2, are both basically meaning that the black pawns aren't going to really get anywhere.
That's right. White couldn't even consider playing moves like G4 and F4, F5, which is what happens in the game. So, all in all, that explains why Svidler played F6. He's really trying hard to prevent this move, isn't he?
Yeah.
And now Kramnik plays the kind of move that I think most players wouldn't really consider. Because, we were thinking about how are we going to get that pawn forward, how are we going to get these guys going. But instead he just goes A4.
Well, I mean, that's just a move. I don't think I'd even consider that move. Like, at my level, the sort of low club level player, I don't think that would even occur to me to look at.
Well, I think even some stronger players wouldn't really appreciate the idea of that. I mean, why do you think he did that? Apart from, the potential idea that, I wasn't there watching it, but he might have accidentally touched it.
Is it just another way to stop those A and B pawns advancing?
Yeah, exactly. He's just trying to stop B5, isn't he? And if black goes A6, he runs into bishop B6.
And his pawns are just dead in the water.
Or, well, we've got to be a bit careful, because maybe black can get away with bishop takes F4. The idea is that if you take me, then I'll take you. But maybe white's got rook F1 with a weird double attack, hasn't he?
Lots of possibilities.
But probably after A6, I think Kramnik intended this move. And now that really does... He does what we call, he fixes the black pawns here with just one pawn. Because if black goes B5,
you can take
we
it
can
en
take
passant.
en passant. So he's now done this sort of strategic advantage of playing the pawn on A5 and limiting black's pawns on the queen side.
Right.
And that means that he can now turn his attention back to the centre pawns and try and get them going. So he can play moves like G3 and bishop D4 and E5.
So black's important pawns have basically been neutralised by one white pawn.
Yeah, exactly. And black's got no play. I mean, if I just show a few moves, rook C8, maybe I can just go... I mean, I'm not saying these are the best moves, but let's have a look. G3.
It's a possibility.
Bishop C5. In fact, I'm pretty much tempted to go bishop B6 again in this position. I quite like this idea, but it's not the only idea. I think I'm going to stick to G3. Let's stick to G3, and we can probably just go like bishop D2 or maybe capture, and I don't know, king B4, rook C8. Let's just maybe if I just show a kind of pawn ending in this position. I'm just going to play a few moves out. I just want to get a pawn ending to demonstrate what we were talking about earlier. We now reach a completely level pawn ending with 6 pawns each. Who do you think's better?
Well, definitely white, I think.
Why?
Because, white has that huge majority of the advanced pawns in the centre, and as we talked about, those two wing pawns that black has, the A and B pawns, can't really do anything. They can't advance.
The king can
just
easily go via B6, can't he?
And the fact we talked about the fact that white had that advanced king, and black's king's right over in the corner, really not supporting any of his pawns, and white's king's right there in the middle of the action.
Exactly. So again, whilst those moves played weren't necessarily the best, it helps demonstrate the strategic pawn structure.
Yeah, it's the idea we're talking about, rather than sort of exactly the right moves.
And obviously, ideas at Chess on Toast are the most important things, aren't
Absolutely.
they? So, A4, rook C8, and here we see white just try to... Well, he swaps off a pair of bishops, but now, again, that one pawn prevents black from doing too much with these. A6, should we take or should we push?
No, I want to fix it, so I'm not gonna take it because that would open up attacks on my king. So just move the pawn forward.
That's
and
right.
Then
suddenly black gets a bit of play, doesn't he? Maybe this is actually quite good for black because the king looks a bit dangerous here.
It does look dangerous.
So Kramnik played B6. Doesn't that give black a protected pass pawn? I mean, that's quite a big thing, isn't it?
Well, it does, but the king is there to stop it advancing. You could move the king, say, to A4, and that black pawn can't really move very far, and there's not a great deal I can see straight away that black can do to advance it much
That's
further.
right. So now we see Kramnik again turn back his attention to these guys here. So king F7, black uses his king, and now H5, a nice idea. So rook takes C1. Well, that's not really the move that black wanted to do, because he could be gifting white an open file, which is quite a nice idea. But instead he threw in check first. And the idea is that if black takes with the H pawn, which, well, he could do that. I mean, I don't see why he didn't do that. Maybe white could take with the rook. I don't know, rook H8. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but I don't know. I felt maybe black's a bit concerned after something like king A4, rook H2. White's got something really annoying like rook C7.
Wow.
So takes,
and then the pawns, you can't really stop it.
Well, he can,
yeah.
but then we see the marauding king come into the game. Look. and we're going to end up winning the rook. Well, let's have a look, actually. Is this that good? King takes b7, king d7. Bishop b6.
Bishop.
Well, this is unclear. Again, we have not really analysed this. I quite fancy the idea of e5 again, though.
Interesting moves, though.
So the idea is to play e6 check, and then... well, actually, this is quite dangerous as well. Who's this dangerous for? I have no idea who this is dangerous for. Maybe check. Bishop takes e7. Bishop d8. Okay, probably this is actually bad for white now. But I'm not saying this was forced, but this idea of rook c7 to take advantage of this. So basically, black's idea of king takes was just to control everything. And then he took with the bishop, which is quite a surprising move, gifting black, well, the c-file back. But actually what he's doing is, he says, well, I'm just going to look on the king side and get these guys going forward, which is exactly what happened.
And leave my rook over there to support them, sort of thing.
So black went rook g8, g4, h6, yeah, I'm not sure.
Just stopping that pawn going to g5, maybe?
He is, but that's quite a weakening move, isn't it, to allow that?
Right, I see.
Especially since the rook's on it as well. I mean, white could have gone check here, but this was black's little trick, because after this, how do we save the g pawn?
Ah, yeah.
So instead he played rook h5, which is a lovely little move. And the idea is now to play e5, isn't it? So king f7, e5, and now the pawns just steam forward. So the bishop had to move. e6 check. Does this look good for black to allow... I mean, it looks like he's going backwards, isn't it?
Yes, I mean... I don't know. It doesn't look...
Well, probably Svidler thought white was going to take this.
Yeah.
And maybe he's okay now. But Kramnik played a lovely little move, rook h4. And that's one of those grandmaster moves, isn't it?
Yes, it is,
I mean, it appears to... Well, why are we defending a pawn when we can start going forward and attacking? But the idea is that he wants to play f5 and just take the h-pawn with the bishop, doesn't he?
Mm.
So it's quite a simple idea, isn't it? And after king g7, f5...
So he's advancing his own play while really sort of taking away any black's chances for counterplay.
Exactly. Notice all this time, black could of course taken this. But we're going to see these pawns are pretty irrelevant at this moment, whereas these pawns are quite relevant.
Yeah.
So...
he's got more important things to worry about than that pawn on bishop.
Yeah, if I take this, I mean, I think actually this is a forced loss, isn't it?
Yeah.
Despite the fact that white's only got a bishop and a rook, it's actually forced mate after this.
Wow.
You see the power of these pawns?
Yeah.
They're taking away all these key squares from black's king. So, yeah, actually, he's threatened with mate in this position, which is quite amazing with just an endgame, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't often see that, but the pawns are playing such an important part.
So again here, pawn up, but he loses the pawn back. But as we see, white just gets those pawns rolling. And hopefully those who are going to play the Grunfeld, anyone watching this who is interested in this opening for black, this is really what you've got to avoid. Look at that. Look at those pawns compared to the black ones. I mean, complete contrast, isn't it? So black struggles, but actually this is game over, isn't it, after rook g4.
Wow.
And now he sacrifices a piece. If king takes h6, what happens now?
Could you just take the pawn with your pawn?
Yep. And then here?
Just start advancing your other pawns.
Yeah, I really wanted to show this because look at that. I mean, that's beautiful, isn't it?
I mean, it's funny because we often talk about a rook being worth 5 pawns, but in this situation where the pawns are all advanced up the board, the rook's actually not going to be enough to stop them.
Well, even black has a bishop, but he can't do anything about it, can
No.
he? It's an amazing position, picturesque position, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing that black can do to prevent one of these guys queening. In fact, maybe if I just go like this, I'm just going to show f6. It's a brilliant position, isn't it? I mean, you don't often see that. So in the game, black took back, but now white has 2 passed pawns, and this is far too easy. e7. If rook e8, d6, king takes, d7, rook has to move, and we queen, and it's game over.
Wow.
So Svidler kicked around with rook c8 check, king b3, and again if we take d6, bishop c5, it appears to save the day, but actually after d7 the tempo attack on the rook means that white will definitely get one of these pawns home, isn't it?
Fantastic.
So again, even 2 pawns against the lone rook is winning. King b3, bishop c5, and lovely move rook c4. And here Svidler resigned because after king takes h6, can you see the win? For
the win now.
still got to be a bit careful. There is one trick in this position for black.
You could just take the bishop, and then when the rook takes it back, you could queen your pawn.
Good, that's the winning line. Just to say, after d6, it feels like d6 should be winning. But actually, black can take that and sacrifice the rook because he gets that. And maybe black can even try and draw this. Look, after this, king g5. If that pawn gets eliminated, there's no way white can save that, is it?
No.
And this is actually a draw because we've achieved a fortress.
Yeah.
The king can just move around somewhere around here, and actually white can't win.
No.
So Kramnik would have to be very careful. But obviously Svidler could see, disrespectful at this level to play on. So a very, very masterful game by Kramnik there against one of the world's best players. So again, the last sort of thing to remember from this game is if you want to play the Grunfeld or play any opening where you allow your opponent the centre, you've got to watch out for those pawns moving down the board.
Yeah, very, very impressive game. Thank you very much for that, Lorin. Kramnik's first win in the Candidates tournament, showing just what made him the world champion just a few years ago. Well, there you go. That's the round 8 game of the day from Chess on Toast. If you want to know more about Chess on Toast, you can check us out at www.chessontoast.com. But for now, we'll join you back tomorrow with round 9 of the FIDE Candidates tournament from 2013. We hope you've enjoyed the video so far, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.